question that I want to look at is this. Is metaphysics avoidable? Some people will say, well, you just don't need metaphysics. Let's do away with it. Let's have nothing to do with it. So is metaphysics avoidable? And I will give the answer, yes. People avoid metaphysics all the time, or at least they try to avoid metaphysics all the time. The first way they try to do it is they try to avoid it by trying to reduce it to absurdity. They'll throw many of the arguments given from a figure like Hume or Kant or any other key leading thought leader in that regard to say, see, whenever you try to do metaphysics, they just reduce and end in absurdity. So do away with it. Or you're going to find some people that are going to show that certain statements are not necessarily metaphysical. So see, you don't need to do metaphysics if you can just find non-metaphysical propositions or statements. And there are some people who just flat out deny that metaphysics is even a valid discipline. So how might we respond to such a thing? First of all, I think what we need to look at is this. There are many more metaphysicians in this world than actually physicians, because everyone to some degree does metaphysics and not everyone does physics. You can't avoid doing metaphysics. Metaphysics is a feature of the world that we live in because it's the world that God has made. People may say they are not doing philosophy, but ironically, that's a philosophy in itself. And we find this all the time when people try to say, I don't need logical thinking. You do logical thinking, I don't need logical thinking. Well, let me get this straight. Are you or are you not doing logical thinking? It seems like they're using the law of non-contradiction when they don't want to use the law of non-contradiction. Well, that's a metaphysical statement. It's a logical statement built off of and grounded and rooted in the concepts of metaphysics, as would be the principle of identity, law of non-contradiction, the law of excluded middle, the law of causality. So let me give you a few examples here. All people who offer indicative statements are doing metaphysics. So all people who are actually trying to say something in a meaningful way are engaging in the topic of metaphysics, whether they like it or not. For example, any assertion that something is, which is an existential judgment, or that something is what it is, a copulative judgment about what it is. So you're saying this is the case, or you're saying this is this particular thing. A dog exists. Well, what exists? A dog exists. So that it actually exists and you're defining something about it. You're doing metaphysics. Why? Because you're talking about the essence and the existence of the thing, what it is and how it exists. Now, a person cannot avoid doing metaphysics. It's part and parcel of living in this world. And the reason you can't avoid it is for the same kind of reasons that you can't avoid the topic of ethics. To deny ethics is an ethical choice, and to deny metaphysics is a metaphysical choice. The denial or disregard of metaphysics is a statement about reality and relations in reality and how reason functions in reality, which are all metaphysical claims. You can't get away from this metaphysical universe because the second you say, I deny metaphysics, you're giving a predication about reality, which is a metaphysical statement. If you try to dilute metaphysics, if you try to get around metaphysics, you're going to make metaphysical claims. So like it or not, you're doing metaphysics. Now, let me give you an example of how this might apply. This is an example from the topic of abortion. Now, we know the issue of abortion is metaphysical and it's ethical. If universal essences such as human nature are in fact real, which is a metaphysical question, and if all human beings possess this essence, and if human knowledge can know universals such as human nature, and if there are universal moral rights possessed by human beings based upon universal human nature, then the right to life must be defended on these rights, and abortion violates the rights of another human being. The point is this. If you're going to say that it's a human being and you can know that it's a human being, then it carries the ethical responsibility of actually being a human being. If you cannot grasp these kinds of things, if you cannot know that metaphysics is real or you're denying it, you're losing your metaphysical basis to make ethical claims about the topic of abortion. Now, let's turn this to another issue. Abortion continues along the metaphysical lines when it talks about the notion of actuality and potentiality. You know, you'll hear people say, well, it's not really human life, it's just a clump of cells. And we say, no, it's human life with the potential for greater human activities, such as rational thought. And we get into this debate about, is it really a human? Is it not a human? Well, those are metaphysical claims. And the potential activities that can come from it are also metaphysical claims. So if all individual human beings possess universal human nature, they also possess, as soon as they possess human nature, a real potentiality to exercise future distinctively human acts, such as reasoning, even if they are unable to at that exact moment. This assumption of real potentialities, like the assumption of real essences, is also a metaphysical question. If there are no real universal natures or potentialities, then we do not have the capacity to know them or make judgments, nor do we have the moral obligation to recognize them. So all of the people who are engaging in this issue of metaphysics and potential life and actual life and the debate on abortion and pro-life causes, you are engaging in the topic of metaphysics, whether you like it or not. The question is whether or not you're using a good metaphysic to actually engage on the issue.